Great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session this morning, where we will explore the new Let's Grow grants with the team from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. If you haven't seen my face before, my name's Eve, and I'm the Member Services Manager here at WALN. I'd also like to welcome Vanessa Slater, our Landcare Expertise Exchange Facilitator, who's joining us today from the WALN team as well. But before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on beautiful Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I consider myself fortunate to help restore this beautiful country. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend a deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today. I acknowledge their ongoing connection to land, sea and sky as the world's oldest continuous living culture. So if everyone could please acknowledge what country you are calling in from on the chat function, that would be fantastic. I'd love to see kind of the diversity of land which we're calling in from today. However, I imagine it will be quite Whadjuk and Binjarab heavy. So thank you all for joining us this morning. I'd also like to acknowledge our funders, the WA State Natural Resource Management Program and the National Landcare Network. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have Kelly Dawson, the Senior Policy and Grants Officer, who is the main contact for this program. And we also have Nicholas Dufty, the Director of the Urban Greening Program and the Program Director of Let's Go. So I'd love to hand over to Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Eve, and we are very glad to be here. Nicholas and I will be presenting to you this morning about the Let's Grow grants and also the WA Urban Greening Strategy, which I will hand over to Nicholas first.
Great.
To start talking about.
Thanks, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. My name's Nicholas. Great to talk to you today. Thanks for making time to find out more about the Let's Grow grants, and we hope today our presentation and the time for questions at the end will answer everything you need to know so you can put in a successful application. That's our goal.
All right.
So, also acknowledging the Whadjuk Noongar land on which Kelly and I are placed today. We'll kick into more about the grants. And as I said, there'll be time for questions at the end. We'll answer some of your questions.
Okay.
So, in January this year, the government launched the first urban greening strategy for the Perth and Peel regions. That strategy sets out ambitious vision and target for the Perth and Peel regions with respect to urban greening. And perhaps most significantly, it really tries to establish urban greening, urban vegetation as a type of core infrastructure that makes our urban spaces livable, biodiverse and pleasant for everyone who lives and works in that area. We're also very much about keeping cool as the climate increases the temperatures and improving well-being of people and animals and plants that live in Perth and Peel urban areas. The target is ambitious, as I said, 30% target by 2040, which is less than 15 years away. We also, in the strategy, have a set of principles that we hope will be useful for guiding new planting projects, including those who might be seeking a grant funding package for. Right amount, right place, right kind, right approach. So these are a whole conversation, but just to give you the headline, right amount is really about getting more, keeping what we have where we can and planting more. And that's aligned to our 30% canopy target. Right place is twofold. One about making sure that we locate vegetation in the place where it has the greatest benefit. So that is often by planting where people live and work, as I said, the urban area, where people can benefit the most from the shade and the cooling and the health implications of having urban vegetation. But it's also about preparing the site where you plant as well. So what's below the ground is often key to getting the right canopy above the ground. And preparing a place is part of that right place principle. The right kind is about choosing the plants. We don't tell you exactly what species you plant, but we hope you choose things that don't take too much water, that can thrive in an often constrained urban environment, and importantly, can boost habitat for native plants and animals. right approach then is about working together. So we believe, and the strategy sets out a vision which encourages lots of people to get involved. And that's one of the main purposes of the grant program, to help people get involved, get their hands dirty, dig holes, and also work with their friends and neighbours and their communities, because if a project is planted by people who benefit, then you get that appreciation and knowledge, and also that care and interest that can help with the ongoing maintenance of urban vegetation. So in a nutshell, that's the principles in the strategy.
Excellent.
Yes, so the grants are one action in the action plan which supports the strategy. So I won't go into detail now, but for those interested, there's 66 detailed actions in the action plan. And the first action is to roll out this funding program through the grants, $10 million over the next 4 years, to help people plant mainly trees in the urban area. The goal, as I said, is to create leafy, shady, cool places that help to keep our suburbs and workplaces cool in the hotter times of the years. And for that reason, we're really prioritising trees and canopy. We're not excluding lower vegetation, because we know that as a system, that's the best to have both. But in an urban environment, you can get a lot of bang for your buck if you plant trees, particularly larger trees where there is space, to provide that overarching shade. And then where possible, some lower vegetation to complement those trees. The grants do allow for funding to be provided for some supporting materials up to a point. So things like mulch, stakes around your trees, tools you need for watering and digging holes, and delivery of your plants is also possible to be covered in your grants. But what we're really emphasising is that the money is to be prioritised for plants, particularly trees.
Okay. Okay, I'll cover this. Yeah. So in terms of the Let's Grow grants, we have 2 streams available for round 1. Currently, we have stream 1 is for designed typically for smaller projects, so they're valued between $500 and $10,000, exclusive of GST. They are designed to be for sort of your fairly simple planting and straightforward projects. We have found so far with applications that we've been receiving for this stream that some community groups and schools like to start small, and so that's where stream 1 is ideal for that, to get a feel for what it's like to have a grant and what's involved with that process. So with this stream 1 small project, you have up to 2 years to complete your planting project, which makes it ideal for planning and preparation, particularly when you're ordering stock. We understand that there is an ideal time to plant, which is generally in winter. You also need to give put your tree order in with nurseries and growers. And sometimes you may not always be able to get the plants that you want, so there can be a wait. So that's where the 2 years allows that a bit more flexibility and being able to deliver. The one thing I would like to reiterate with the stream 1 application, that no contractor or subcontractor component can be included in that. So it is really about doing the grantee or the applicant and that group or school will be the ones doing the work, or they'll have staff on board for the schools. They'll have staff on board to do the actual work. You can't actually hire any contractors or landscapers to do any of that work, and you also can't claim for any project admin. It is really a labour of love in that sense. You'll be doing it, as part of the grant application itself.
And if you want to have those costs covered, that's stream 2, which
it is, yeah. So there is an option if you find that you do need to incorporate a contractor, that you can bump it up and go into the stream 2, and we will allow applicants to change their scope to be able to do that. One of the bonuses though of the small project stream 1 is that you get the money up front. so that you can get underway as quick as possible. And we are aiming to roll out these grants for Stream 1. It's a continuous application period, effectively, so you can apply at any time within the round, up to 30 June for this round. But it means that you get the money up front, ideally within, we're aiming for 1 month processing time at this point, for you to get started. And then you can acquit at the end of the 2 years or whenever your project's completed. In terms of the Stream 2, these are for much larger projects. They're your $10,000 and one to up to 100,000 exclusive of GST. They really are suited to larger, perhaps more staged, complex projects. So if you've got an area in particular in mind that you could break down into sections, you could quite possibly apply for multiple grants for that same project over years, if that's the way you want to do it. You get up to 3 years to complete that as well. So that extra time does allow you to take into account that you're dealing with contractors and other external services to make that project happen. Like it says, you can include labour, contractors, and there is an option to claim up to 10% of the overall project costs in project administration and delivery of that. So Stream 2 projects are scrutinised a little bit more than, say, Stream 1. You will need to provide a itemised budget so we have an idea about what you're actually spending on. You will also need to provide quotes, particularly for the labour hire component, and that is so that we can determine. We have a WA government policy around ensuring things are value for money and actually quoted correctly, and that applies particularly to any services that involve labour hire. So you need to provide 2 quotes if you're going with any labour services. And the other part of the the Stream 2 projects is that we will pay half up front and then the remaining is paid in instalments based on a progress report. So, which over 3 years is not an unreasonable process, and that's fairly standard for most grants in that sense. Let me go to the next slide. So in terms of what meets the criteria for a project to be funded by a Let's Grow grant is that it is within the Perth and Peel region boundary and that it's located in an urban area. It can be on private land, but it has to be on private land that is utilised by the community in some form or another, or public land. So, and that encompasses obviously public reserves that have approval from the landowner. So for community groups, that's really important to understand that you have buy-in from your landowners, and you will need to provide us with proof of that in your application. The focus is on tree planting, and that's because it directly feeds into the urban greening strategy of increasing our tree canopy. So that is a focus. So we do look for number of trees that are proposed in your application. Having said that though, we do have applications where low-level vegetation is all that is actually asked for, and depending on the site, we can approve applications for sites that can't handle trees, and it is on a case-by-case basis, but there are some sites that just don't handle trees or the survival of trees. So it's not a hard and fast rule that we will say no to an application that doesn't have trees, but it is very much site specific for that. And you do need to justify it as well in your application, so we do need to understand why. Future survival of new plantings is absolutely critical, and you need to consider that. So it's not just a case of, get a grant, plant the trees and off you go. We want to know that it is actually going to survive or has a good possibility of survival, because it is actually about growing those trees into, a tree canopy in the future, and we know that that takes time. So future survival, particularly for community groups, we will be looking at how you're going to water those ones in the future, and obviously how you go about doing that. We know that schools have obviously their own water supply, so that's something that doesn't necessarily have to be explained in as much detail, but particularly what the applicant is going to do to ensure its future survival is really important. It does need to be in the ground. We do need to remind people about that. We have had some applications where they've asked for it to be in planter boxes or pots, and that's not necessarily. Yes, it could contribute to tree canopy, but that's not really about the underlying principle of what our strategy is all about. And so we are looking for you to be doing it in the ground. And one of the other things we do look at is we want to make sure that it is good value for money. That is an underlying principle for all state government agencies anyway. But you need to consider that, one large tree, say at $10,000, is possibly not necessarily considered good value for money from our perspective. We would much prefer to see applications that have a wide variety and diversity of plantings so that we have better future survival, and also that would be considered better value for money from the government's perspective. Couple of key supporting documents here that we would love to reiterate. Please view these. This is effectively going to be the ultimate Bible for you when you apply. But the guidelines, now hopefully this opened. We did this before. There we go. The guidelines is available on our website. It is a rather large document, hence why we probably don't email it out to anyone. But please, I recommend you all download that document. It is a really extensive guideline that outlines all of the different things that we look for, how your applications are assessed, what's eligible, what's not eligible. The other thing I would say is also we have a suburb list in case you're not sure. I think we have a couple of people online today who possibly may not be within the Perth and Peel regions. That's not to say that might not change in the future, I'm not sure. But if you're supporting someone or a group that's within that region, by all means, we encourage that. The other one that you will need if you are applying for a Stream 2 application is you will need to fill out that budget template document as part of your application, and that is actually itemising out your tree selection and also your supplementary items and all of the things that are going to be included that you would like us to fund.
The FAQs.
The FAQs, yeah. This is the next other really good section that we'd like to point out. This covers a whole lot of different questions on here that you might be asking yourself already with your application. There's a whole bunch of questions on here that we've already answered. And it also has a number of really helpful links, which can give you other information that can support your application. If, of course, you have any additional questions that we haven't covered, you can always email us, which if I just go back to the presentation, that's the frequently asked questions. But if you need to contact us, I am available to answer your queries on the Let's Grow inbox. So if there's something that we haven't covered, by all means, feel free to drop me a line. I'm happy to respond. And sometimes they are very niche questions, so more than happy to help out. And there's our contact number as well if you ever need to give us a call. I'm happy to take any questions from the attendees if they have them. And
awesome.
Eve, I don't know.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Nicholas. We've got a couple of questions in the chat I thought we could start with.
Sure.
Brett from the Wildflower Society asks if tall shrubs are considered as well as trees where there is limited space or proximity to roads.
Yes, yeah. So we are prioritising trees, but we recognise that sites are sometimes constrained. So if that's the case, just explain that you've got that limitation. Then we have no problem in funding what you can fit in, just as long as you've made an effort to fit in trees where you can.
Awesome, thank you. We've got a question from Vardir who says, can schools apply for funding for supporting materials to extend their existing reticulation systems to reach the new trees? That's a really good question.
Yeah, so reticulation was one we have had a lot of discussion on. We're very supportive of the Waterwise program, so we're very keen to minimise long-term water use, but we recognise that new plantings do need to be watered for particularly the first 2 or 3 dry seasons. So we will pay for irrigation to be extended, but it's really for that establishment period. So we're not looking for very elaborate, permanent, expensive type irrigation controllers and irrigation contractors. But if you're extending your poly pipe and putting in just a few dribblers around the trees, and those costs are fairly modest in comparison to the plants you're putting in, then we would be favourable to that kind of proposal.
Yep, that makes sense. We've got another one from Brett who says, do you have a minimum pot size for the trees that will be planted in public spaces?
No, but as Kelly said with her example, we're really keen for and the value for money and long-term maintenance to get people to plant more of the smaller ones so they can grow and establish a canopy over the long term. But we know, I mean, local governments are experts in this, and often what they do, if it's in a high traffic area, they'll probably plant somewhere like a 35 to 100 litre tree and put stakes around it to help it survive that initial period without getting trampled. But I think if it's in an area that is sort of out of the way, seedlings often present the best value for money, but we don't fix any size requirements specifically. It's really just that common sense, value for money, and really long-term sustainability that we're focused on.
Fantastic. We've got a question from Tracy who asks, as a friends group, we have no ABN and therefore require a sponsor. For the applicant details in the form, is that for the friends of group to fill in or the sponsor details on their behalf?
I can answer that question. I just had this question emailed to me this morning. So the applicant is the friends group, and then you fill in the sponsor details as the actual sponsor. In a nutshell, we would say that the applicant is the person or the group that's going to do the work and effectively probably do predominantly most of the admin, I would expect as well, for the delivery of that grant. But they would then hand over that to the sponsor effectively to hand back to us, say, for instance. So the sponsors are required because they're the ones that will sign the agreement and receive the funds. But in our eyes, we believe that group or the sponsor would effectively hand over everything over to the applicant to do. So really the applicant is the people on the ground doing the work.
So I guess on the application, they need to first find a sponsor who is willing to take that role of sort of custodian of the finances. And then I guess you can pre-populate their name, but you'll need obviously to insert their details as part of your application. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Tracy, could I ask as well, have you had any luck with finding a sponsor for your project? Because that's actually something that's been requested of us to try and find friends of groups to link with a sponsor for these grants specifically. So I'm just curious if you've had any luck with that.
Sorry, was that Josh?
I'm asking, I think Tracy.
That was back to Tracy, the person who asked the question about the sponsor. If she can hear me, maybe she'll type the... Oh, she's in the process with Urban Bushland Council. Perfect.
Okay.
That's good to hear.
Right.
Good to hear. Robin asked if, well, they just say that they're able to access free stock via Valley Verges, who is another community group. How can I incorporate if she needs to put a value to that stock, saying that it's overflow from main roads?
So the plants, she's got a source of plants that's free.
Yeah. Robin, do you just want to jump on and ask that question yourself? You're just muted at the moment.
Yeah, Valley Verges in White Gum Valley every so often they have a big overflow of plants, everything from Banksias to Chewits, which I've accessed for Manning Park Ridge and planted, mainly the Chewits, and now I've got lots of Decipians. I can get them for free. It's an overflow from main roads not being able to plant, and they seem to give them to valley verges. So
I see.
you can get hundreds of them nearly.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, so you don't need us then.
I've still got to plant them.
Yeah, so
right.
what's your question? What would you actually fund under the Let's Grow grants, do you think, Robin?
Well, I'd like my next question under that, because I've dragged my hose across the road, which is straight opposite my house, 10 hoses watering. And if I can get the council to put in a 1,000-litre water container, would the grant cover that?
Look, we're really funding plants and then some supporting costs. So if you already have the plants, that makes our grant not really suitable, because we're not going to just pay for a tank. But if you wanted to add some additional plants, I guess we would then consider the tank or whatever else you need supporting those additional plants. But then you need to sort of consider the value for money. If it's, a 10,000-litre tank for only 5 extra plants from under our program, that would look a bit out of balance. It depends on the sort of numbers that you're thinking. We're happy to sort of consider anything, so feel free to put an application in, but we're really looking at that value for money, how many trees particularly, and then how many other plants we get for the dollar you're requesting. And so you just bear in mind that ratio.
That makes sense.
Thank you very much.
Got another one from Brett. Do the supporting costs go as far as the purchase of corflutes to protect the plants as well?
Yes, yeah, happy. I mean, those protection mechanisms can be really important, particularly for tube stock. So yeah, again, it would just be the ratio, between your plants and those supporting materials. But yeah, they would be covered.
Perfect. Does anyone have any questions that they would just like to ask directly of the presenters? If not through the chat, feel free to unmute yourself and pop your hand up if you'd like.
Other than a pace, where would you suggest we get stock from in the South Metro?
Good question. We are not dealing directly with nurseries, so we're probably not the best source of that information. And plus, as a government agency, we can't really sort of prioritise some businesses over other businesses. But we know there's a lot of good nurseries around the metro area. I know around the Oakford area, there's a native plant specialist nursery, which you'll find if you Google that one. And there's another one, I think, more towards the coast in the southern suburb. But I think if you put in nursery into Google Maps, and then you can search by your geographic area that you're interested in, hopefully you'll find a few options.
Yeah, Robin, Native Plants WA is located down in Rockingham. I'm not sure if that's too far for you, but they do some really great plants and a good diversity of stock as well.
Bear in mind as well
that
some places do deliver. So, and we cover those delivery costs. So you can put in a lot of these, some nurseries will have an online ordering system. So you can go through, see what stock's available, click on the ones you want and choose a delivery option. That can be good for people who have, may not be able to transport or get out to remote places. Yeah, hopefully that provides an option.
Cool. We just have one more question from Vadia, who says, can multiple projects be applied for by the same group or school, or is it better to merge them into one application?
You can do either, actually. We have had some applicants already apply, put 2 applications in at once for different areas. That's how they liked to, differentiate them. But effectively, you can do that. You can apply for at the same time, or you can decide to do what we have done found some applicants like to start small, do one small one first, and then they get a bit more confidence in how the process is and then go bigger. It's entirely up to whatever the capacity is of the applicant, because at the end of the day, if you're successful for a grant and you accept it, you also have to deliver it within the time frame. So that means that you do need to have that manpower, woman power, whichever way you like to say
Person
it,
power.
person power, to actually make that project
To implement it
happen.
and then to water them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a limit of 2 applications per site. So if you're a school, for example, you can put in 2 applications in this current round 1 for that one school site. But if you're, say, a community group and you have lots of different sites, there's no limit to how many applications you can put in. So if you have a local government that's willing to support you and they have 10 locations in parks across their area, that one community group could put in an application to 10 different sites, for example.
Mm. I'm just thinking, I've got a question in regarding to like verge plantings. Do you need to get the individual property owner's permission as well as the council's permission to do, say, a coordinated verge planting?
Well, under our right approach principle, we've just found that the more people that are aware and feel like they're participating and contributing and supporting a project, the more likely it is to be successful and long term. So verges are typically managed and responsibility of the council. But I dare say if you don't speak to the landowner who owns the house next to the verge, it's not setting it up for success. So technically, it doesn't tick the box in terms of landowner, but I would strongly encourage you to work with neighbours and people who may be directly impacted by any planting project.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. Any more questions from the group this morning? Got a few thank yous as well. That was a great presentation, guys. Comprehensive, answered lots of big questions I think people will have.
Yeah, maybe I can just talk about next steps. So,
absolutely.
as Kelly said, applications open till 30th of June. But we do have commitment for $10 million to be spent over 4 years. So after we've finished assessing all these applications at the end of June, we'll then turn our mind to the next round 2. We may be tweaking some of the criteria, not sure yet, but it's likely if you have an idea, you're not quite ready to put in an application now, please subscribe to our Let's Grow newsletter, which you can do on the website that Kelly showed you earlier. And stay tuned for round 2. There'll be other opportunities as we spend the remainder of that $10 million.
And I think we vaguely kind of touched on it, but in terms of like community groups with watering as opposed to schools, do you kind of look at that on a case-by-case basis in terms of like, say, if people just want to water in the seedlings for the first year, or even just up until that first winter, basically? Will you just kind of, look at those projects on whether, say, a group has an existing water trailer and they just use the funds to help fill it up, or, I guess, how would you look at that sort of situation?
Look, we're not really about telling people how to do their project. We really just want people to have demonstrated they've thought about it. So if you can demonstrate that you've thought about it and you do have a plan, and it seems to make sense just from a common sense point of view, then we're likely to support the application. As Kelly said, this is not a competitive grant. It's quite different to a lot of other grants. So we don't sit here with 10 proposals and pick our favourite one. It's basically a compliance and alignment check. So if you've got a site and the landowner wants you to plant trees, and you're willing to do the work to put them in and to look after them for a period you think is suitable, then we are likely to say yes.
Oh, yeah, it's I think it's very different to other grant sources that a lot of people I think in this room would be used to applying for, and it's quite refreshing, I may say. We've got one more question in the chat. Could we add plants? I think you already answered this, but I'll ask it again. Could we add plants onto the same site in round 2 and then going forward, etc.?
Yeah. Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. We're keen for that. The more plants, the better, basically.
Yeah,
if you've got
awesome.
space. Yeah. And as Kelly said, if that timing works out better, you don't want to drain your volunteer resources. So maybe staging it is a good approach. But remember, under stream 2, you've got 3 years. So yeah, that might be another option, to do one big stream 2 and then plant them in separate years. But yeah, you can also do a future application.
The other thing I'd like to sort of, I suppose, mention is if you already have shade or tree canopy on your site, but you want to improve it or make it denser, we do encourage that as well. Like it is actually about diversity of what that tree canopy actually is. So if you're looking at doing infill, that is supported as well. And just because you've got shade in an area doesn't mean that you can't further improve that. So that is something to consider, that you can actually, also put in low level vegetation underneath, some patchy tree canopy that you've already got on your site. So particularly for schools, we've found that some of the schools are like, well, we've got some trees and we're not sure about the site. And it's like, but you can add to that. And this grant will fund that if that's what you want to do.
So succession planning. So if you've got an older tree, maybe now's the time to get in a younger one, so it's there to take over.
Yeah. Something to consider as well. Yeah. It's not just because you've got some shade already doesn't mean that excludes that site completely. We want to make, good quality tree canopy as well at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. Robin, I think I saw you unmute before. Do you have another question?
We've got a very active couple of people doing verges around Hamilton Hill, and they've communicated with next door neighbours where the planting is going and saying, as a group, we will contribute to your water bill. Can we use your water? And they've all said, yep, go ahead.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
We've got a very active man who's been prolific.
Wow.
He's great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Whereabouts are you doing those plantings, Robin?
Beg pardon?
Whereabouts in Hammy Hill are you doing those plantings?
Davlac Road.
Oh, yeah. I've seen those. They're beautiful.
And he just plants trees everywhere. And he's also verges on Chesham Way and Dacre and just Banksias. He just plants anywhere really on verges and gets people to water them.
Amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, also just a heads up for everybody, we're kind of in the process of putting together an in-person forum on seedling survival and seedling quality, and we're going to look at watering, root structure, soil amelioration, and we're going to have people in from nurseries as well to talk about nursery best practice. So just letting you all know about that. I think that would be great to discuss, I guess, more about what we've been talking this morning. And I will just ask you all to keep an eye out on your emails and our social media for that one. I think it'll be a great session. Do you have any more questions before we wrap up this morning? Have a look. Yeah, I think we're all good. Any questions? Like Kelly was saying, the email is on that slide. I'll also send it out to you all post-session. The recording of this session will also be sent out post-session, and I'll timestamp all of the questions. So if you want to go back and look at the answer for a specific topic, that will be there too. So, and that will be a great resource to also share out with your networks if other people are also thinking for applying for these grants, because yeah, they sound great. Low admin, relatively easy to access, non-competitive, and rolling. It sounds like a great opportunity for everyone here today. And again, thank you so much, Kelly and Nicholas.
Our pleasure. Thank you for organising.
Oh, of course. It's our pleasure. Yeah, have a lovely day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing your applications.